Welcome to Bad First Impression, the podcast that is still about movies and where we meet them. That's kind of the fun thing is like, we're keeping the name and I'm not really like changing anything about it. I'm just changing the way I do the episodes. Because like also, I like the name. I don't want to get rid of it.
Yeah, then you gotta start over. That's too much work.
Here's what I'll say about the name. Does it make sense? Kind of a little bit. Like, here's what I say. The podcast had a bad first impression in that we are changing premises 6 months into doing it, basically. You know, like that's kind of my whole where do I land on this? Guess psych, we're doing it a different way. We're doing it a second way. I'm your host, Devin Warner. And I'm sorry, I'm your co-host, Devin Warner. I have with me my co-host, KeriAnn Eng. This is a series of episodes where we are one by one going to be covering all of the filmed Lord of the Rings medium. I say medium because not every single one of them is a TV show or is a movie. That's also true. Not every single one of them is a TV show,
Yeah.
but it's mostly that they're not all movies. Starting our series on the films of the Lord of the Rings franchise. We're going to do these in release order, which means we're starting the series out with one movie that weirdos know about and two movies that nobody knows about.
What if we just one day find out that there was actually another one before this?
So I like did some I think this is actually worth like going over a little bit. I was like, let's look and make sure there aren't like some TV movies that I hadn't heard about. Prior to this, it seems like it's mostly like radio plays. Like they'll read chapters on the thing. To the best of my knowledge, this is the first like feature length, full proper adaptation of one of the books. And that was kind of my delineation is like, okay, this is like the first major production of it. Even though obviously the books had, they had mattered for decades at that point. I think that this was the result of a lot of time trying to like get one of these productions up off the ground. The film we're all talking about, you all of course know what we're talking about because it's everybody's favorite entry in this franchise. We're discussing, of course, the well-known and beloved film The Hobbit, Rankin Bass's animated 1977 TV movie. It's an adaptation of J.R.R. Tolkien's novel The Hobbit. I believe is subtitled There and Back Again? Or is that Bilbo's?
That's Bilbo's.
That's Bilbo's in-world book. I think the book might be titled Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey. I think it's like
The Hobbit.
Is it really just The Hobbit? We'll pull that up as we work through this. I wanted to before we get into the movie itself. What is your exposure to Rankin Bass?
None.
Do you know what
Unless
Rankin Bass
maybe
is?
I know but didn't know that I knew.
Do you know what Rankin Bass is?
No.
So they are the animation house that's behind. They're primarily associated with like claymation, but they did all those TV specials of like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is probably the most famous one. The one that was biggest for me when I was a kid was The Year Without a Santa Claus. They're mostly claymation. There's a couple animated ones like Frosty the Snowman is animated. But yeah, they're mostly Christmas, sometimes like holiday themed. They're movies, they're like an hour-long specials, but they mostly aired on TV. So you don't have did you watch any of those as a kid?
I saw Frosty the Snowman and Rudolph.
And that's kind of your just like the hits, right?
I mean, I was very young at the time.
So that's the thing is like these might have just been on and you weren't really paying attention to what was happening.
Yeah. I mean, that was most of my childhood.
Yeah.
So it still is. Honestly.
Yeah. As in just things are on in the background?
Really no.
Yeah, I was about to say. I was like, I know the way you watch things now. Like you actually pay attention to them and like engage with them.
I have to.
I get really I know there's a lot of people who like to have things on as background noise. I don't like TV for that. You know, like I'd rather listen to a podcast or have music on.
I can't pay attention. Like if I have something on, I have to pay attention to it. I have a very one-track mind, like ADHD shit. So if something is on, and even if I'm trying to do something else, I will have to focus on one thing.
Mhm.
So either I focus on the task I'm doing, and I'm not paying attention at all to anything that's going on, and then I have to go back and rewatch it or re-listen to it or something like that.
I get like obsessive that like I missed some detail that
Mhm.
will make it like a worthwhile experience. Does that make sense? Or I'm
Yeah.
like, I watched the thing, so I want the full experience of having seen the thing. I
Yeah.
guess.
There have been times when I've watched a TV show and then I look away for a second and was like, I think I missed an important facial expression, and I will rewind.
I mean that's it's not like those don't exist, right? Like that's the whole point of like performance
Mm.
is that those little moments, even when there's no like memorable line or even camera movement or something, like the choice an actor makes in a moment can matter a lot and it can ultimately affect the way you feel about something. This is a really bizarre like thing to go down for a movie that is animated, and not to like discourage, not to discount the value of like a good animated performance, this is not really a movie that has those. This is a movie animated for TV in 1977, meaning it looks pretty cheap, I think.
I mean, it probably looked pretty good for
it
1977.
I think that like it has a solid art style, which we'll get into in a little bit. It is an interesting art style, and like it's not like clipping, and it's not like a lot of. Have you ever watched like the Jetsons or
Mhm.
like Scooby Doo, where like you see them walking, and it's just obviously the same background
Yeah.
rolling bit. There's not like a lot of occurrences of that. This does look like it's happening in unique environs that aren't just being copied over and over again. Um, I want to talk a little bit about like the inception of this. So there's a lot of conflict over like whether this movie was legal to make, basically. The argument of uh Rankin Bass, who I believe is I want to say it's Saul Bass and I can't remember the Rankin's first name. But their argument is that the way the copyright on the property works, it was legal for them to make it as long as it was distributed in the United States because it was in the public domain at the time. The Tolkien estate disagrees with that. Like they think they're like that's actually incorrect. And so basically they told them to halt production, and their response was, "You can't really stop us from making this, but we would like to not have you come out and say you disagree with this." So they basically come up with an agreement that says we won't like add things and we won't deviate from the source material. We're going to tell the story as you wrote it. And I think that deal basically made enough sense because I believe this also like aired in Canada. Like it's like everything was like copacetic enough that this movie could air normally, basically. Um, then I know because this movie just adapts The Hobbit. Their intention was to make a sequel that adapted Fellowship of the Rings. A separate studio beats them to the punch and puts out the movie we're discussing next week, Ralph Bakshi's The Lord of the Rings, which was intended as a two-part adaptation of the three-book The Lord of the Rings, which is also sometimes that's the other thing is like it's sometimes referred to as one big book
Yeah.
that was just published three separate volumes.
Mhm.
Um, that movie is so expensive and so long and so unsuccessful that they just don't make a sequel to it. Like I think that movie ends at Helm's Deep. So like not even all the way through Two Towers. And so because that movie doesn't get its proper sequel, uh Rankin Bass decides to make an adaptation of Return of the King, basically skipping over the back half of the Two Towers. Um kind of leapfrogging it and making this weird lopsided trilogy of animated movies. It's very strange the way these fit together. Now, I was looking for continuity between them, like in terms of like voice actors even, right? What's really funny is John Hurt, who plays Gandalf in this movie, is actually in The Lord of the Rings, the Ralph Bakshi one, but he's playing Aragorn instead. He's not playing Gandalf, and then he's back in Return of the King playing Gandalf again.
Who plays Gandalf?
Uh, let's see who plays Gandalf in the 1978 Lord of the Rings. Gandalf is played by William Squire. He's a Welsh actor of stage, film, and television. To be honest with you, he's not somebody I've ever heard of. So these movies, I know in terms of like modern, like how they're thought of, they at the very least like they've put out like DVD sets of like the three of them, and they're like the animated trilogy. So like nowadays, this is, I think, kind of how they're presented to audiences. They're like, oh, it's all like one thing, and the fact
Yeah.
that it was like people producing in competition with each other, basically, we just kind of like shrug over that. You hadn't seen either of the any of the animated ones prior to this,
No.
right? I still haven't seen the other two. I'm gonna watch them probably like right before we cover them. Uh, really
I'll probably do the
loosely,
same.
really loosely, what are your thoughts on this one?
I thought it was fun. I also thought it was dumb. I was surprised at how much singing there was. It's
So
very musical.
it's
And then I
ex-
didn't realize that until I read the book.
it's extremely musical. Have you read The Hobbit?
I literally just finished it.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
like 5 minutes ago.
What?
Yeah.
Like right before the records?
Yeah. Like in the bathroom I was reading the last page.
What? So just to say, like we all did last week's like preview episode of this series. Um, we like went and grabbed lunch in between records, so you just like went to the bathroom and like you just had the last couple pages of the audiobook or something?
No, there's a PDF version online that I was just reading.
What did you think of The Hobbit? I'm curious.
It wasn't bad, actually.
Really?
I talked a lot of shit out of it. I talked shit about it based off of the movies, but
Mhm.
I completely understand why they made it a trilogy. It's fun. It's easy to read.
Yeah.
It's
My recollection of it, I read in kind of a weird order. Like during lockdowns, I was like, I've never read Lord of the Rings. I should do that. So I read the proper Lord of the Rings, the three books, and I basically liked them. But honestly, like a lot of things I consumed at the time, I don't have a great memory for everything that happened in them.
mhm.
Um, like a year ago now, I was like, I've never read The Hobbit. I should read The Hobbit, and I read it, and I remember like in disconnected from the rest of the series, I was like, this is kind of kiddie. I don't like it feels like immature. Like I don't and obviously like Lord of the Rings is also a pretty kid-friendly series in general. I don't really remember I don't really think I cared for it when I read The Hobbit.
It it was less kiddie than I thought it would be, honestly.
Uh-huh.
It still had it the thing is everything, like especially the modern trilogy, they make it so much about like fighting.
hmm.
It's an adventure book. It's all
Yes.
about the adventure.
Yes.
So in that way, in that they don't focus on any of the battles, I get it. It's a little bit it's more child friendly, but I don't think it's really a kid's book.
I think it's like I'm trying to imagine a kid today like being read that book
Mhm.
and enjoying it, and I'm kind of having a hard time picturing that happening.
Because there's a lot of lore in it.
Yeah, there's a lot of like reference to like things that won't even become relevant until like late into the Lord
Yeah.
of the Rings. Um I just restarted the audiobook for this, which as I said on our preview episode, they are nominated. They're narrated by Andy Serkis, who plays Gollum. He's really going for it. I do really recommend them. Like this is all to say, like you said, there's a lot of singing in the book.
Mhm.
Um, he like sings and also The Hobbit more so than the other books, which have singing in them, but it's not as prevalent. This is like every couple of pages. There's like
Yeah. There's a
long verse.
lot of
There's
songs in
sometimes where
it.
it's like you'll look at it and you're like 6 pages of singing. It's all just verse,
Yeah.
and he'll just like sing the whole thing, and it's like honestly very likable. Like I like hearing him. He doesn't have a bad singing voice, but he's also like that's not his thing. You know, he's not like a professional singer, and I I I'm enjoying it so far. I find it to be like I listen to audiobooks on the go. It's a hard
Mhm.
thing to like be on like getting on the subway and you hear him like and in the halls of Isengard. Like it's a lot of that sort of stuff. And you're like,
Yeah.
this is a bizarre listen. This movie's relationship to the music, it's like happening in a round over the score while dialogue is also happening in this movie. It's really
Okay.
weird. Like the way it happens is like you'll hear like Bilbo talking about his adventure while there's a score happening, while you can hear like lyrics from the dwarves singing in the background.
That seems like a little too much.
And no, like in the movie, not in the audiobook.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
In the movie this happens like, and I agree with you, it is too much because like it makes those moments weirdly stressful to listen to because you're like, what's going on?
Yeah.
There's so much information being given to me. Um, I agree with you that this movie is basically cute. I don't know that I would say I
Mhm.
dislike it. I also wouldn't go out of my way to recommend it to somebody who I'm like, that's like a really cool adaptation of it.
Mhm.
I do think it's really fun. This movie's 77 minutes long because it aired on TV. I do think it's really funny that The Hobbit, in terms of filmed adaptations, is only being presented as this really shortened version of the story, or like a 7-hour epic over the course of
Yeah.
3 movies, and everyone was like, "It probably shouldn't be 3 movies, like, it should maybe be 1, maybe 2 if it absolutely has
Yeah.
to be."
Well, it made me think back onto so one thing I will say about this movie is it made me want to read the book,
Okay.
which is, why I read it. I mean, I was thinking about reading it before that anyway, but
Mhm.
then after the movie, I was like, that is really interesting. So much happened, and also nothing happened. And it's so different from the trilogy that I had watched
Mhm.
first that I was like, so what actually happens in the book? So
Yeah.
and reading it, I understand why they split it up. I
Mhm.
think they split it up a little weirdly, um,
Into the movie
into the
trilogy later?
trilogy, but it was a lot more accurate.
Mhm.
It had a lot more involved in it, which obviously you need to do for a 77-minute
This
movie.
this movie doesn't really skip things so much as it does gloss over them.
It skipped a couple of people,
Mhm.
like
What are the
Bjorn.
major events? Because you have the book fresh in your mind. What are the major events that this movie just outright skips?
Bjorn does not exist.
Bjorn, who's Bjorn again?
Bjorn is a king of. He's a shapeshifter.
Okay.
They completely skip over his part. It's honestly not like super important. He's somebody that comes back in at the end during the wars, but also I think it's so hilarious that the Battle of the Five Armies, which the entire last movie of the trilogy is based on,
Yeah.
takes up about 6 minutes in this
It's there. I think
movie.
there's literally more time dedicated to setting up that 5 armies are arriving than
Yeah.
an actual battle happens. Like, there's more time of people showing up and someone being like, "Oh my god, elves!"
Yeah. I
And
think the climax of the movie was for them creating it was actually just the dragon. And they
yes.
didn't really care about the battle.
Mhm.
Well, in the book also that Battle of the Five Armies, that was only like 40 pages.
Mhm.
So it's not like a hugely important. I mean, it's important, but it's
Mhm.
not like
As in, it
the whole
doesn't
lead up is going to defeat the dragon,
it
not
doesn't
the
need to
battle.
take up an outsized percentage of the runtime is what
Yeah.
you're saying, but maybe more than the, like, it's almost, like, comical to the point that I almost think maybe it's intentional. Because what you were saying is, like, this is a movie where, like, a lot of things it's not as, like, epic in scope as The Lord of the Rings are. I think because let's talk about, like, Bilbo versus Frodo as a
Hmm.
protagonist,
Okay.
right? Bilbo, he's kind of, like, more along for the ride, whereas Frodo, I feel like, is more centralized. Does that make sense
Yes.
to you?
Yeah.
Like, Bilbo is just kind of present for big things happening, and I think what happens to him in the Five Armies is he's literally knocked out and then
Hmm.
just wakes up afterwards and is like, "How was the battle?" Like, that's kind of his vibe.
Yeah.
And the movie, like, you could almost argue that it's being really accurate by, like, not showing you the battle. Like, you see them everybody arrive, and you see him get knocked out, and you see him wake up, and you're like, "So who won? Which of the 5 guys won?"
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
That so it being like super fresh in my head. Uh, they do talk about the battle, but he literally is not there. And I think they do that a lot in this
Where
movie.
is he during Oh, wait, because he's knocked out in or no,
But he doesn't actually get knocked out until later.
he's hiding away in Smog's
No, just has the ring on.
That's right, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
which is also an interesting thing, but
The
later.
way that this movie handles it's interesting how different it is
Yeah.
versus how virtually every other movie kind of treats the gravity
Mhm.
around the ring itself. Um, I well, let me tell you this, or let me ask you this, because I haven't seen the live action Hobbit trilogy. You have. Probably not in a while, it sounds
No.
like?
Not literally since the last movie came out.
Yeah. So um which one do you prefer? This or like that trilogy? Like, which one do you think is the better avenue to tell this story?
For I mean, the trilogy,
Mhm.
it's definitely more accurate. It's a little more it's because it's so long, it's able to tell the story better.
Yeah.
It's able to actually make characters because there was not really characters
Hmm.
in this version of the movie.
No, it does kind of feel like they're just following a script. Like they're like,
Yeah.
we show up to this place and this thing has to happen.
Yeah.
And there's not this kind of like Byzantine sense of like archaic rules that like the Jackson movies are so good about.
Mhm.
Because Jackson is so personally obsessed with those books. Like those books are really important source material to him. So as a result, he leaves nothing out. And when people show up, they're like achingly sincere. Like because all the characters are saying things like they really believe this shit all the way deep in their bones. I don't really get the sense from the performances in this movie that like when they show up to the Elven King, he's really passionate
Yeah.
about what's happening here.
Nobody really seems passionate about anything in this movie.
No.
I mean, it is voice acting. I mean, you can show a lot
You
with
can
voice acting, but it's
there
also like it's old.
it's
I mean, I don't know.
I think that it's like, well, it's how do you look at genre things at the time?
Mhm.
Even with something as venerated as like Lord of the Ring, like because it was like beloved, but it was still kind of in that area where like action fantasy in general was not really regarded as like as important work, I guess. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah.
Um, and so I think some of that comes through in some of the performances where they're like, "What this thing that's going to be like on TV? Who gives a shit?"
Yeah.
That being said, I don't think any of the performances are specifically bad. It just feels like they're not really being given any notable direction.
No,
Um,
not at all.
no. So
So like
yeah, yeah, continue.
there's actually characters in like you can tell the difference. You know who Feely and Keely are. You know who
Mhm.
Owen and Glowin and Bomber are.
Yeah,
This you have no idea. They're just like
you get
guys.
introduced to all of
Yeah.
them at the beginning, and as I've said
Barely.
before,
Yeah.
I have I have a hard time with Lord of the Rings names. We were
Mhm.
talking about this a little bit before, how they sound similar to each other. I think because it just makes when there's a batch of introductions, it makes it like sound lyrical to
Mhm.
introduce like Owen and Glowin and
Yeah.
is there a third
Feely and
Feely and
Keely,
Keely. Yeah,
Bomber,
so it's
yeah.
like, and I think that like in the book anyway, maybe not all of those characters are intended to have like interiority and be separate entities from each other. Like Feely and Keely are for all intents and purposes, they're one guy. It's just they're
Yeah.
one guy in the form of two guys standing next to each other. It's kind of like I would say it's kind of like the Scooby and Shaggy situation where like those characters are functionally like in a plot point of they're one character and
Yeah.
they don't
Yeah.
really have any separation between each other. And that's kind of how I feel about any pairing of characters whose names rhyme with each other's in the Lord of the Rings, where I'm like,
Yeah.
Owen and Glowin is like, could we just have Owen? Like, I don't think we need both of them because, like, I know that like there's a lot of issues with like numbers and like getting to a lucky number. So I'm like, I do feel like we're just
Yeah.
kind of arbitrarily trying to hit that. But
Yeah.
we get to 14 characters and only 7 of them are actually characters.
Well, in this movie, there's like 3.
Yeah.
So
Um. So this this narrative is it's all the setup party is just 13 dwarves and Gandalf show up to Bilbo's house and say, "We need you to go on an adventure."
Mhm.
I'll tell you this doesn't make any sense to me. To the best of my knowledge, he is not famous for being a burglar, but they are like, "You'll be a burglar." I
Yeah.
Is there any justification given besides the fact that he's slightly smaller than a dwarf and can maybe get through like small cracks and places? Is that the case with this?
So, for one, I think it's hilarious that there is 0 context for any of that in the movie.
Mhm.
There's not a ton of it in the book either.
Mhm.
It's just that, so Bilbo's mom's side of the family is Took,
Mhm.
and the Tooks have been on adventures. They have, like,
Yeah.
this reputation of going on adventures and, like, being willing to do all this
Yeah.
kinda stuff and traveling and all that stuff, mostly with Gandalf.
Mhm.
But his other side, who he more resembles, is the Bagginses, who have a reputation for not going on adventures and not doing anything.
Yeah.
So Gandalf comes and he knows his mom,
Yeah.
um, and the Tooks and how they went on adventures, and he was like, "You're coming with me. You are part Took. You are now the
It's
person that I choose." And he just like he doesn't really give that reason specifically to Bilbo. He's just like, "You're coming,"
it's
and
it's
he just
really
chooses him.
funny the way he just kind of gets profiled because his mom liked going on
Yeah.
adventures, or rather, his mom's side of the family historically has people. It's like it's a genetic disease, is liking adventures. Um, yeah, they just show up and say, "You'll be our burglar," and he's like, "I'm good. Actually, I don't need any of this." And they basically just bully him into going with on this
He
journey.
doesn't even really, at least in this version of it, he doesn't really object. He just kind of
Because the movie
goes.
doesn't have time for it. I like did listen to I've listened to the beginning section of the book so far, and it is a lot of him like there's a lot of it about like they show up and they like demand like a 9-course
Mhm.
meal, and it's him not wanting to be rude.
Yeah.
So there's like pages and pages of him frustratedly cooking for these people who keep showing up at his house. And then they start singing. This song is actually in the movie. They
Mhm.
sing a song about how much he hates it when they're rude and they smash
Yeah.
plates.
Yeah. That was honestly
Honestly, a pretty good bit.
that's
That's
also in like that entire portion of the book is in the live action version of it,
yeah.
and it is probably my favorite part of the whole thing.
It's like
And they
a
do sing the song, and when I watched that, I was like, "Why the fuck are they singing?" And now I watched this and was like, "Oh,
it's an issue
okay."
with the book and like really all tellings of the story because like it's honestly a great way to start any story is like you're minding your business and then a group of guys show up and say will you feed us a huge meal
Yeah.
before we all go on an adventure, by the way, you're coming with. Like I do think that that's a great. I love when a story just hits the ground running like that, and none of the context that you get is actually happening in the story. It's all the narrator telling you this is what's
Mhm.
true of hobbits, or this is what Gandalf knows about hobbits, basically. Um, I agree. I think that's probably, and I don't mean this to like damn the rest of the movie as like out and out bad. That is the best part of the movie is watching them show up to the house
Mhm.
and like and throw this like big party.
Yeah. Well, for one, for this one
Mhm.
specifically, I love the way that Gandalf shows up. He just like whoo from behind a
He
tree,
just like
and then
apparates.
yeah,
It's ridiculous.
and then the smoke rings go around him or whatever, and then all of a sudden he just points, and there's dwarves coming from
Mhm.
everywhere.
Yeah.
They don't really do that whole like two at a time or one at a
Mhm.
time dwarves coming in,
Yeah.
but I
And
mean
that
that's for speed.
that is
But
closest that that the book gets to like really giving character traits to them is that the dwarves come two at a time, always with a rhyming partner.
mhm.
And then those partners will show up and you'll like get a little tidbit about them, but it's mostly told to you through what they ask for food wise. Like that's the most character
Yeah.
development you ever get for Feely and Keely. Um so I want to touch a little bit about like the idea of like this movie kind of glossing over things. Uh it's not just the Battle of the Five Armies. There's also what is the spider's name?
Everything. Oh, what is spider? Do they have names?
I don't know if the spider has a
Everything.
name or not. People are gonna get mad at me. I should say like we kind of touched on this a little bit. I'm definitely like a neophyte. Like I've read the books with a really vague recollection. I'm watching many of these movies for the first time as we go through. Like I don't even really have an ongoing relationship. You have grown up seeing them, but by your own admission are like, I'm not like a super fan. Like you
Yeah.
don't know
Yeah.
all the stuff. You're not like a walking wiki for it.
No.
Um, so we're just gonna be wrong sometimes. Sorry, I don't like I don't know
Not
what
with it.
else to say other than like this is just not my bailiwick. This is not the thing I know a ton of stuff
Mhm.
about. So I guess sound off in the comments and
Yeah. I
give
used
us
to know a
lots and
lot
lots of hate.
more like 10 years ago. I've forgotten that since.
It's the
You know?
sort of thing that like it's not that I don't care about it or that I don't like it. It's just that like how much real estate in your brain can you
A
reasonably
lot.
justify like giving up to memorizing elf names?
I mean, some people a lot who
And
give
I
up a lot of time learning Elvish.
I guess
So,
the argument, yeah, neither of us speak Elvish, I guess.
no.
Is it true that like some people it's like Klingon, like there's some people who can like hold conversations in Elvish? Yeah, I don't do anything like that. Um Good for you, I guess. I suppose. If you want to email us in Elvish, go ahead and you know what? Actually, that's the thing is if you're watching
That'd
this
be
and
cool.
if you can write in Elvish, feel free to correspond with us in Elvish, and we will find. I think that's fine, right? We can commit to finding someone who can respond to something in Elvish. So if you have a question and you speak Elvish, send it to us, and we will respond in English, but appropriately. right?
How will we know what they're writing? What to respond?
Like what? Like we're gonna find a
Are we gonna
translator.
translate it?
We're gonna
Oh,
ask.
okay.
We're gonna,
We're
and
gonna.
also, by the way, similarly, if you speak Elvish and are willing to translate messages sent to us from Elvish back to English, let us know because we're also looking for that as well.
Teach us Elvish on the pod. It's
Yeah,
fine.
teach us Elvish on the pod. I'll tell you what, we can like. I don't have anything prepped for this week, but like we could maybe like we could incorporate learning Elvish into remaining episodes, right? Because we need segments at the end of it, right? So maybe we like maybe a segment we do for the rest of this series is we like teach each other a sentence in Elvish at the end of every
Okay.
episode. So you just like figure out like a saying or even just a word, like an interesting word, and then we'll try and teach it to each other. And maybe by the end of this, we'll be able to have like a basic, like when you learn a new language, you can kind of like, oh, excuse me, police officer, can you tell me how I can get to the nearest convenience store? Like we can have one of those types of conversations in
Okay.
Elvish. Um,
Some
yes,
Duolingo ass conversations.
yes, absolutely. It's like, excuse me, Jen is from the region of, like whatever of Isengard. That's so. I want to get back to all this to say we don't remember the name of the spider. All right, I'm sorry. We'll look up the
Yeah.
spider name at some point. I'm sure the spider will come back. I'm sure he's like an hour and a half of there and back again, right? Or an unexpected journey. By the way, I did look up the proper full title for The Hobbit is The Hobbit, comma, or There and Back Again.
Or
It's in the title. Like it's like how like sometimes old books do this a lot where they're like it's an alternate title, but it's really kind of part of the whole title. But like the title is The Hobbit or There and Back Again.
oh, that's
Yeah.
weird. Okay.
Anyway, so the spider.
Yes.
We're going to talk about the fucking spider. I swear to God.
Listen, at least we're actually talking about the movie this time.
I know. So this is
we're already on and out.
so for people who are jumping in now, because I really think there are people who like the last week's episode when it comes up, it'll just be called There and Back Again.
Okay.
I think there are some people who are going to look at that and they're going to say, I'm actually good and unsubscribe.
Okay.
And you know what? That's fine. I really wish those people the best. I'm hoping to get people who want to do a deep dive on this. This is yours and mine third time sitting down to record a conversation where we talk about the Lord of the Rings. This is the first of those 3 times where we're actually discussing like a movie and its production and how it was made and how it relates to the source material. We previously recorded an episode about that was nominally about the extended trilogy, the extended editions of the trilogy. That episode is primarily about taking the bus to Staten Island.
And Quest for Camelot.
And Quest for Camelot, is weirdly, I actually think we discuss Quest for Camelot more in that episode than we do any one individual movie in the trilogy. And then
I think we talked about the trilogy for maybe like 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Yeah, we don't really talk very much about it. And we're also now not really talking about this. We're like
Well,
getting so it's fine. We can get off and do like tangents. I think it's totally okay.
We're already doing exponentially better than last time. So
we've we've said the title of it, we talked about the production, we have talked about at least one plot point. And one plot point that we seem to be totally unable to elaborate on is the spider. So what I wanted to say about the spider is it's basically not a plot point. It's literally he shows up and he pulls out the sword that he gets the sword from Gandalf, right? Sting?
They get the sword from the cave from the trolls.
Yes. So he has the sword and he is facing off against the spider, the name of whom in all this time we probably could have stopped and looked up the name of, but at this point we're not doing it.
No.
That fight you don't see it. It's literally
and in the book that's a good fight. It's an interesting fight.
It is literally like Windows Movie Maker like spin transitions.
Yeah.
Like they're like blend spin transition. I'll have to maybe I can apply the effect here so people can see what I'm actually talking about. Cuz he's like on guard and then you see the spinning transitions and then he's like, "Wow, that spider sure was a tough fight. Like it keeps like coming back to it.
Yeah.
But that's like there are actually like a couple spots in here where there were clearly meant to be commercials. Like
Yeah.
it'll black out.
Mhm.
Weirdly, I keep thinking those moments are moments where they're like going to commercial because then like right afterwards it's like, woof, what a
Yeah.
crazy fight that
Yeah.
happened over the last 3 minutes of ads. uh, and it just like glosses over these fights. It's animation, so like dialogue scenes cost the same amount as action set pieces. It doesn't really make sense that they skip over those, because I want to get into this movie's treatment of Gollum,
Mhm.
because it doesn't cut down on like
No.
Gollum at all.
Well, can I cut back to
Yes,
the
let's
fight
go.
scenes?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
One of the things I noticed that I was going to make fun of was that, like in video games, sometimes
Yeah.
they are taken out with one hit.
Yes.
Like one slice of the sword. He has no fighting background whatsoever. He had never touched a sword before that. They're all taken out with one slice by him.
And this is like a fearsome monster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot. It happens with all of them. It happens with the spiders. It happens with the trolls. It happens with the orcs, goblins, which I didn't know were the same thing.
Orcs and goblins are the same thing?
According to the book, but in Lord of the Rings, they're two different. So
We're gonna have to do some.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write this down. This is like. So I think that it'd be good to establish some ongoing narratives here, right? One, we're gonna learn. We're gonna become fluent in Elvish over the course of these episodes. The other one is, are orcs and goblins the same thing?
according to like some of the first pages of the book, it said there is no direct translation between
Mm-hmm.
to English from the old language, and supposedly orcs and goblins are the same, which is also the reason why the goblins are so afraid of the sword that was called the orc basher or whatever it was. There was a sword called the orc sword or
Yes.
something.
Yeah.
There was two of them actually, but they're afraid of that even though they're goblins, and that's because goblins and orcs are the same thing. But also, why wouldn't you just translate it to be the goblins?
Yes. I think this is gonna need some like. I'm gonna need to figure out what the actual semantics of this
Yeah.
like whole thing are, because I'm gonna be honest with you, that didn't make any sense to me.
Okay.
It's totally, it's not due to any inability of yours to explain what happened. It's that I think the information available to you is scattershot and conflicting with each other. Um, are there any other like fight scenes that don't happen in this movie? You know, like those feel like the two most egregious ones is the five armies and the spider.
um,
Smog kind of happens.
kind of, yeah. They don't. It wasn't really a battle, I guess, with the river people, the river town.
Yes.
Lake town. That's what it is, not river.
The lake town.
I mean, it is a battle, but it also isn't at the same time. They didn't gloss over that one as much because it wasn't as big of a battle.
Mhm.
The battle with the trolls was fun because
Is it the one at the campsite?
yes,
Yes.
where it's the first time he's burgling.
Yes. Yeah.
They don't really gloss over it so much as the way that they're defeated is toned down a lot. So in the movie, it just seems like Gandalf brings the sun, and he just makes the night come back fast.
Yeah.
In the book, he can't control the sun. So
yeah, it does feel like this movie is playing a little fast and loose.
Yeah.
With what?
Yeah. In the book, Gandalf just like because they fight with each other so much, the three trolls, he just makes them argue the entire night so that they argue until the sun comes up, and they don't eat the dwarves.
Yeah. They're arguing over like what, like who gets to eat who, basically.
Yeah, who gets to eat who, how they're gonna eat them, how they're gonna cook them, all that kind of stuff.
And then when the sun comes up, then they have to vacate the premises, basically, or they have
They
to
turn
hide.
to stone.
They turn
If
to
they
stone.
get
That's
hit by
right.
the
That's
sun,
right.
they turn to stone. Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I feel like that happens. I feel like Smog is not like because
Okay, there's some points in this movie where they say smog, and there's some points they say smog.
Yeah, like literally, they can't decide.
Yeah.
On the pronunciation. What pronunciation do you default to?
I like the sound of Smaug better.
I do too. But like when I'm just like at like speaking speed, my mouth just automatically says smog. But I think you're right because smog is like a thing. It's
smog is like in the air.
Smoke and fog.
Yeah.
Smaug sounds more like a name. So I guess we should, because I feel like we should be unified on a pronunciation. like I'll
I mean,
I'll
he's probably named after Smog.
yeah,
So.
after the the phenomena smog,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. But I feel like
I just put that together.
Smaug is more fun to say.
Yeah. And it's more of a name.
It feels more separate from the thing.
Yeah.
So I'll try to meet you. I'll meet you at that pronunciation. We're a Smaug forward podcast.
We're gonna get hate for this. But yes.
Someone's gonna like get really mad at me. That's the other thing is I'm like I want to talk about these because I feel like they're movies that people will actually care about and have opinions about. But at the same time,
the opinion is gonna be you're incorrect.
yeah,
in the pronunciation.
yeah. Well, then whatever. Like that's our bad faith argument is like, well, I didn't know. What? I only have a computer that has all the information in front of me.
Yeah.
So yes, we're a Smaug podcast. We're a Smaug cast. It's not really a battle with Bilbo initially because there's he's involved. Smaug is kind of like involved in two conflicts. One, there's with Bilbo when he's burgling, and then the other is with the lake people. It's not really. He doesn't really fight Bilbo. Bilbo kind of like he uses the Gollum tricks that he learned. We'll touch on Gollum momentarily, but he uses kind of like the trick he used to get the ring away from Gollum, which is like talking cryptically and using riddles and kind of like trying to anger him and draw him out a little bit and to like get him to reveal what his weaknesses are. And then yeah, there's kind of a siege of is it just literally called Lake Town?
Yeah.
It's
I mean, also Dale.
Dale.
Dale I think is the more town on the land.
I should get a map book actually because what I'm always bad about with these fictional universes is like the actual geography of them. Like, what does it mean to go from one town to the next? Like, what kind of ordeal actually is that?
Oh, not right now. I do also want to touch on the map that they use. But
the map they use in the film? Okay, yeah, we'll get to that momentarily then. But there's kind of a siege, but there's a bird that comes into Smaug's like lair while Bilbo is there alone, who Bilbo then passes the message on to he's not the king of the lake people yet, but he will be made after he kills Smaug. Who's like, hey, by the way, he's missing one scale on his belly. Hit him right there. And that's how they defeat him. And like, it's like a cool scene, like because like really he does come out and like burn the whole town immediately, and then they hit him with the arrow and he falls in the lake. But it's not fully an action sequence. It's basically the dragon comes out and one guy with an arrow is like, I got this handled. But that's kind of it for like action sequences.
Yeah.
There's really nothing else I would say like no set pieces are happening. There's one scene that like kind of comes close, I guess, is when they get taken in by the are they called wood elves? Is their term? Yeah. Because those are different from the elves we see in the trilogy proper.
Well, there's two elves in this movie. There's the elves with Elrond.
I know, yeah. I'm referring to like, but the wood they're a different type of elf altogether. Yes, is all I'm saying. Yes. So
and there's wind elves and sea elves and there's
do those factor into the movies at all, or do they just kind of exist on the periphery?
I think they just exist.
Okay.
Yeah, they don't come into contact with them.
I was like, so we talk a little bit about like extracurricular stuff. You said you're reading The Hobbit. You said you may, time dependent, may try to like get through the trilogy, which is something you haven't finished before.
I've been working on it, and I got to page like 85.
So it's a lot of like the problem with Fellowship of the Ring, which I actually think is a very good book. The first like 100 pages of it are like descriptions of door frames and shit. Like it's a hard way to start if you're not already familiar. I imagine it's probably easier on a reread when you're like, oh, I remember the door frame describing chapter, you know?
Yeah. So I have been reading Lord of the Fellowship for like 4 years, and I've only gotten to page 80, and I finished The Hobbit in 3 days.
So you liked The Hobbit more. Like you found it an easier in. It
was definitely easier because just the way that they show up at his door was already that's immediate. Gandalf shows up at his door within the first 10 pages, and then everything else happens almost immediately, so it's a lot faster paced.
I'm trying to think of like how Fellowship, because I like the start of Fellowship a lot.
I'm on page 88 and they're still in the Shire.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like the movie, especially the extended edition, which is the one you and I have both seen most recently. The movie, it's not like it gets you right out of the Shire.
No.
But it doesn't I think it's just so much of it is visual, right? Like, Bilbo pulling his trick, hiding at the
Birthday party.
party,
Yeah.
and like I think Frodo is he fits more into the mold of like the hero, the identifiable hero's journey. So
Mhm.
you can kind of get on board with him faster than you can Bilbo. Bilbo, like you meet him and like he's not what's attractive about the opening scene. The situation is
Yeah.
what's compelling about it.
Yeah.
Whereas like Frodo, I think is kind of easier to identify with. So like just reading that is like the situation isn't as compelling when you're reading it versus if you can actually see it. Um, I forget exactly where I was leading after that, but yeah, I don't know. Oh yeah, extracurriculars. I probably won't reread the whole thing. I'll probably try to do them as audiobooks, because I feel like those might just be a little bit easier to kind of like make time for. I've never read the Silmarillion, and I was thinking I might attempt that and like do my best to like come up with a book report at the end, basically.
Okay.
Um, my conception of it, what I think it is that it is an in-world history book. Like it's a book that like the characters in there might like
Yeah.
read as historical reference. So we'll see how getting through that goes. Um, I'll
Good
do
luck.
that, and then I don't know if there's anything else that like I'm gonna try to do extra. There are like, of course, uh, J.R.R. Tolkien's son, Christopher Tolkien, basically spent his career writing like ephemera and guidebooks to the rest of the
Mhm.
series. Like I was looking them up. There's a series of like 12 books. Like some of them are just like songs by Tom Bombadil. Some of them are like, here's a book that's entirely a history of a war. There's one book that seems to be literally just an index to another book. It's really weird. I don't think I will have time for all that.
I don't think I
So
have interest in all that.
that's the thing is like I like once a while back when I had read the trilogy and liked them, I was like, oh, it'd be fun to like kind of go completist on it. And I looked into them and was immediately discouraged by like, I don't think I want to read a whole book of songs.
Mhm.
I don't think.
I honestly, even for The Hobbit, I just skimmed through some of the songs.
Yeah. Yes, The Hobbit is incredibly. It's not necessarily a downside of like the story, but it is a thing that like you may have opinions on. Basically,
I was surprised. I was very surprised that they were
a
there.
lot of this book is
It's yeah.
songs. And a lot of, and as we said, a lot of the movie is songs. It's
Yes.
just there's kind of never not singing in this movie.
It threw me off a lot
Yeah.
because some of it sure was narration, some of it just kept being the same. Their journey is what's ahead.
Hmm.
They sang that like 4 times, five
Yeah.
times maybe. It just surprised me so much. I was like, what?
Yes.
Why? Why?
I
And then I read the book, and then every single person
And you're like,
sings
oh,
in
because
that.
they
I
were
was
just
like, oh, I
adapting it.
guess, I guess,
I
okay.
I guess that kind of goes into the original agreement where they're like, we're just going to adapt it.
Mhm.
And I think it's that too much of the book is songs to skip them over and then say
Mhm.
you're adapting it directly.
Yeah.
But you can tell they kind of smush it because, as I said, they're playing the songs over other scenes, like that aren't just the scene where they were singing the song
Yeah.
originally in the book. Um, it's weird. It's just it gives the whole movie it might give it kind of a faster pace, honestly, because this is
Mhm.
essentially like it has the energy of a hangout movie. It's just kind of like Bilbo like floating through these events.
Yeah.
And like, because
Yeah.
even the dwarves themselves, until the Battle of the Five Armies, are pretty inert characters. They don't really do much.
They they're very not warriors. It seems like the movie kind of plays it off as like they're kind of helpless. They don't
Yeah,
win any of the battles. They immediately keep getting taken as prisoners
yeah,
constantly, and Bilbo always has to save them.
yeah.
Like not at any point do they put up a fight.
And also sometimes when they're not in trouble or in need of saving, they'll walk up to like, okay, Smaug is in there. He's like, you got to go do it.
Yeah.
And his argument was like, why do I need to go alone? And they said, because we're paying you. He's like, I understand that. That means I do 1/14 of the
Yeah.
work. How about one of you guys go do this? And they literally they do leave in the movie where he's like, is no one gonna go in with me? And it shows you like 13 sad looking
Yeah.
dwarves like like staring at their shoes. And I'm like, at what point did they do anything to contribute to this until they start the war that kills half of them at the end? That's really the only
That's
active thing they
actually
ever do.
like accurate to the book. They don't. They get captured a lot.
Yes.
They don't really do much else.
Yeah.
There is at one point where Thorin fights alongside Gandalf, but that is once.
Yeah. And
Nobody else
he's
fights
the
really.
only guy who ever really does anything. The rest of them are like, it's the way that like the scenes are animated almost. I'm like, no, like even if they were just standing on the sidelines, where are they most of the time? Like literally, did they go to a field somewhere else because they're not in the background of a lot of shots? Um, I want to get back to Gollum, who's a weirdly like he's a long section in the middle of this
Yes.
movie. It's a, from what I can tell, it's basically the whole scene. It's a long, and I mean it's consequential. You know, it's the transfer of the ring between the person who's had it the longest to the next person who's probably going to have it for the longest amount of time. Um,
But it's also the ring is not super important in this.
the ring is bizarrely unimportant in
Yeah.
this. It's basically just like a fucking trinket that he uses
Yeah.
to disguise himself from Smaug, and I want to say that's basically the only influence it has on the rest of the story.
I mean, it helps him during all of the battles, which are glossed over.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
exactly.
but
Like
that's
literally, like it's he puts it on. He's like, I'm disappeared, and
yeah,
then the battle that he's disappeared for doesn't happen,
yeah.
which kind of implies like off screen what's happening is he's just standing there watching his friends get killed, just like invisible, like
He uses it during the battle with the spiders, which is
to hide himself
to hide
and
himself and to fool. He does a that battle is actually really good in the book, and I'm kind of sad it gets glossed over.
that. Do you know which of the movies it happens in? Is it the first or the second?
I don't know.
I mean,
Probably the
we'll
first,
find out in a couple weeks here, but
maybe
I'm
the second.
yeah. Um, yeah, Gollum's design here, it's a really interesting choice.
Hmm.
He looks kind of like a dinosaur
I
almost.
was gonna
Like
say like a lizard.
he like
Yeah, like a
if you
frog.
have you ever seen The Land Before Time?
Yes. Oh
He looks
yeah.
just
Yeah.
like Littlefoot, like the way his snout is structured. Like that makes sense to you, right? That
Yes.
comparison.
Yeah.
He looks like Littlefoot in this movie. And it's like distracting because like I know the point with Gollum is like his hobbits, aside from their stature, basically look like human beings. Like they have like the similar
Hmm.
facial structure, you know, the same basic
Yeah.
body shape, even if it's
Yeah.
smaller.
Everything except for the feet.
And
Yeah.
Gollum in the Jackson movies does basically just look like an emaciated version of that. Like like it does take a minute to be like, oh yeah, I guess he's about the right size, but like
Hmm.
he still looks vaguely human like.
Yeah. Because
This
he was previously a hobbit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this guy in this movie, he does
Yeah.
look like yeah, he looks more like reptilian than
Hmm.
anything else. Like, and he crawls around like his arms move like a chameleon's when he walks, not really like the kind of like ape like walk that Andy Serkis does in the movies.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting choice they make to make him like kind of like almost like a water demon. You know, like he's like he lives down in this wet cave. It's the only place you see him in this movie.
Hmm.
Um, and he's yeah, he looks more like a monster than he does kind of like you know, like a mutated human being like he does. And I want to talk a little bit about art styles. Most of this movie, as many cheaply made animated movies were at the time, was animated in Japan. And there was some criticism because some of the art style is perceived to not kind of like gel with the vibe of the Lord of the Rings. I don't necessarily I don't necessarily think that like it's wrong tonally for the Lord of the Rings. I do think different characters in the movie look like they are different art styles. Like especially the Elven King, who I was telling you
Hmm.
beforehand, honestly, he kind of looks
The Elven
like
King of the Wood Elves or Elrond? The
the
Wood
wood
Elves?
elves.
Okay, yeah.
He looks kind of like the way like in a Japanese woodcut painting, like he kind of has the weird like the knobby
Hmm.
joints
Yeah.
and the really skinny limbs and kind of like a demonic face that makes him look kind of like a Japanese like oni, like a creature, you know.
Hmm.
And he looks like he's in a different movie than the rest of the characters.
Yeah.
I like his design a lot, to be clear, but I don't really think he like when he's standing next to like one of the human characters. I'm like, what the fuck is this? Those are
Yeah.
like it's like watching Roger Rabbit when you see two cartoons from like different art styles standing
Yeah.
next to each other. It's a little weird. I don't know. What do you think of
Yeah.
the art of this movie?
I think that was extremely intentional and I loved it. Because
Yeah.
every species had a very distinct design. And
Yeah.
I really like that. I honestly much more than the live actions because
Uh-huh.
having a humanoid figure is so limiting. Like I love the design of the goblins. The goblins with like the two throats and the really like wide statures and like
Yeah, the
pretty
goblins are
gross
great in this.
looking.
Yeah.
I really really like that, and you can't do that with a live action, not really,
No, not at all.
unless you
Yeah.
want everybody to look like Jabba the Hutt. I
I
don't
mean,
know,
they're
but
gonna have to be CGI'd the whole time,
yeah,
basically.
yeah. Because like
Um,
even the orcs, which back to the discussion of orcs versus goblins, but the orcs in the live actions they're humanoid as well,
yeah.
and it's I love how they look, but if like there's some things that animation like you just can't compare to it. Like you
It
can do so much with animation, and it's so limiting live action.
it's really freeing to just be like everything animating a figure costs the same. It doesn't matter if it has 8 arms or
Mhm.
like that's the thing is because it's just drawing to drawing. Which is why I'm really excited about the new movie now coming out. I don't know. Did you see any of the stills yet?
No.
Like literally today, like there was a convention or something where I forget who, but like somebody came. It might have been Peter Jackson was like presenting. He's like, these are the first stills from the movie. It looks really cool. Honestly, it's got a very. Are you familiar with the Fire Emblem games? It has this like very kind of like hyper glossy art style that I think some people are probably not gonna like because everybody always dislikes when a new art style is introduced to an existing thing. But I think I don't know. I think this is going to be like an interesting way, and like honestly, I'm glad we're seeing how Lord of the Rings existed as an animated thing prior before we see this new take on it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with you that like it's not necessarily a problem that like the Wood Elf King looks like he exists in a different movie. I kind of like the idea that these worlds have been in so much seclusion that they don't even really look like they belong next to
Mm.
each other.
I
Um,
think elves also in their own are supposed to feel like that.
yeah, no, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
you kind of have that feature when they get to is Arendelle the elves' home?
Riverdale?
Rivendell.
Rivendell.
What is Aaron? Oh, Aaron.
Arendelle is from
I
Frozen.
know. I just realized that as I said it. It's Rivendell.
Yeah.
So yeah, they get to Rivendell and like it's literally just the change in lighting
Mhm.
and like the way that their faces are projected at you. Like they do look like aliens almost. It's a really interesting change. So I don't know. I liked that aspect, and I'm glad that like that kind of made it over to this version, or rather like existed in this
Mhm.
version prior. Um, yeah, I don't know. I kind of I'm trying to think if there are any other like character designs that really stand out to me. Not really, honestly. Like Bilbo looks it looks kind of like the illustrations in like a medieval storybook.
Mhm.
Like the ones
Yeah.
where you just see like the knights and stuff like that. That's kind of what it reminded me of.
Yeah. I really liked the designs of mostly everyone besides the spiders, which I thought was just kind of silly. And also Smaug looked just kind of like a cat. But I it made me it made me realize that we really just sexified them a lot.
Yeah, oh,
Um
as in like they don't
in live
look
action stuff.
yeah,
Like the dwarves are not supposed to be attractive, but we made them very attractive in
the Jackson movies.
the
Yeah.
yeah.
No, like that's the thing is I'm like yeah, of course he's shorter than everyone else and
Mhm.
he's gruff and has like all the facial hair. I'm like he still looks like handsome.
Yeah,
Like he's
yeah. One of the main things is that they always wear the hoods, which they
Mhm.
do in this the animated, and they have long noses and like very distinctive like feet. They look just like normal people in the live actions, and I know you haven't seen yet, but they incorporate a love story, an unnecessary love story, in the trilogy that is honestly kind of aggravating and everybody shits on, understandably. But it's just like they're not supposed to. First of all, you don't need a love story. That's
in
why.
wait, in The Hobbit?
In the Hobbit, yeah.
What is the love story they put into the Hobbit movies?
It has to do with Kiwi. Oh no, Kiwi.
I guess the thing
Yeah.
is that like when you have that much fucking runtime, you have to start like, oh fuck, we got to make
Yeah.
Feely and Keely their own guys, and they have to like fall in love with someone.
They
Yeah.
also include Legolas, who's not originally in it.
Oh,
And yeah, it's Legolas and another elf that they just completely make up.
okay.
And it's yeah.
I guess yeah, he's immortal. Like that makes sense. For a second, I
Yeah,
was
but
like
so
Orlando Bloom is. I'm like, oh yeah, because they're immortal.
yeah. I mean
How?
Elrond is in it.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Hugo Weaving looks so
Yeah.
old. But I agree with you. The whole like everything, no one can just be allowed to like look like a normal person,
Mhm.
or like in the case of something like this that's happening in what's basically a medieval setting, everyone would look like a gross potato. Like why do they all look like real, like the elves make sense to me
Mhm.
because they're basically like they're kind of gods, like they're immortal and they're like immune to a lot of the things that like human beings have like as weaknesses. But like yeah, why does every like uh um Elijah Wood is like the handsomest, cutest
Mhm.
man of all time. And I'm not saying I don't love that performance because I do,
Mhm.
but like he was like a farmer's son. Like he did like gardening work, and like
Yeah.
by their own admission the hobbits don't really care how they look. So it's weird that we see them as like really good looking, like everybody like looks like a fair-haired maiden in those movies. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Um, and it was kind of nice seeing a slightly choppier art style, I guess. Like Bilbo in this movie does not look good. I'm not saying the art design is
Mhm.
bad. I'm saying he looks like shit. Like he doesn't look like a guy who I'm like, ooh, handsome. I don't know.
I mean, I wouldn't say that about any character in this movie, and I like that.
Yeah, no, no,
Also,
no.
oh my gosh, the people of Lake Town, they're the same man.
Oh yeah, yeah.
They're
It's
all the
just it's
same
just
man.
it's just the same. Like literally, they just like traced it
Yeah.
over each of them. I don't remember the main guy from
Bard.
Bard.
Yeah.
That's dumb. It's so fucking funny. Bard.
Yeah.
It's I don't know.
It's
Um well it's like in like uh I love in Dune, like there are characters who have like long complex names as like the Baron Harkonnen, and then the main character is just named Paul. Like it's the best thing in the world. I mean, I guess with Dune like technically Dune actually happens in our universe just like thousands of years in the future. So it's a little, although does Lord of the Rings technically happen in our universe just in our ancient history?
Mhm.
There continuity between Lord of the Rings and Dune? Like, is it like Lord of the Rings, the pageant of human existence, and then Dune somewhere down the line? Dune also has like, there's a similarity to Lord of the Rings in that after Frank Herbert died, his son decided to make a career of writing shitty addendum books to his father's series.
Jesus.
And
Not
it's
surprising.
except for he still keeps doing it. Um, I don't know. I think I can agree with your take though that the art style is like it's incongruous. I think it gives. I don't know if it necessarily like it helps sell the point this movie is making, which I don't really think is anything. I think it's just
Yeah.
to basically adapt to the story. I don't really think this
Yeah.
movie has a lot to say, which is kind of what makes the whole thing just feel like an exercise.
Mhm.
But
I think I'm not saying that it's trying to prove a point or anything
yeah,
to the book. I just think it's all very intentional.
it's good to look
Yeah.
at.
Yeah.
It's like honestly, like my take. I was expecting because people like some reviews I'd read on this, like from the time and just like its lack of any online profile. My take on this movie is I was like I was expecting it to be shit, and I was like, this is a basically good looking production that's a truncated version of a story that should probably be given
Mhm.
a little bit more room to breathe.
Yeah.
But this is like I honestly could see a kid enjoying this.
Yeah.
I don't think I think that for its purposes, this thing is accomplishing what it's setting out to
Yeah.
do.
I also think it's very friendly to kids in that they literally explain every single detail out loud.
Mhm.
Like it was like, this is what this does, this is what this means, this is what like out loud in full dialogue, they explain everything that's going on.
Yeah. Um, I so yeah, I think we're kind of wrapping up on it because like we're now reaching the runtime of the movie. Like we're not like I don't want to go too much longer than what the actual movie itself is. Um, this is an interesting little curio. I think this is worth if you are a fan, if you've seen all the Jackson movies and you're like, and I've read the books, this is worth having seen. I don't know if I would really strongly recommend this movie.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. Do you feel any differently from that?
I actually do.
Okay.
Because of you know how much I hated The Hobbit,
Yeah.
the trilogy. It made me actually interested more in it, and I now do want to rewatch the trilogy.
Okay, I had the same feeling watching these or watching this as I was like I said, I would watch the Battle of the Five Armies, and I'm like, I would kind of like to see this fleshed out.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm gonna get my wish in a few weeks.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm glad to see I wasn't the only one who had those feelings while watching this movie specifically.
I mean, it did inspire me enough to actually read the book,
Yeah.
like almost immediately.
Well, you ripped through it in like a week, you said,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so I don't know. I don't know. Maybe you will get a chance to read the others.
Maybe. I mean, yeah. Now that I actually have a purpose to finish reading this fucking book.
I don't think I don't think you will get through Fellowship and up to Helm's Deep in Two Towers before we cover next week's movie. I don't see that happening because it's just a lot of reading to do in a week. Yeah.
Okay.
450 plus about half another book. That's like probably, I don't know, in the
But
700 to 800
The
pages.
Hobbit was 200.
Hobbit's significantly shorter.
Yeah.
Um,
So maybe it depends how much
I don't know. I mean,
If I have a deadline, I can do it.
try to marathon it if you
Yeah.
can. I don't know. Yeah, so but like, would you agree that this is like worth recommending, but maybe only to like people who are big fans, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you haven't ever seen anything before, I don't know if I would recommend it because there is a decent amount of stuff that I only kind of got because I knew the context.
Let me ask you, if you have not seen the Jackson movies prior and if you've not read the book, do you think this movie would make sense to you? Do you think
Yeah,
you
I think it stands alone pretty well.
Okay,
But
like do
mostly
you
because there's not really much of a purpose to it.
Mhm. Yeah, my only curiosity is like do you need to have a familiarity with the framework of the story? And I would argue like I said, I think a kid could basically follow along with this. I think you're going to be lost at points. I think
Yeah.
you're going to have a hard time and like if you aren't familiar with the later like the saga, like the Lord of the Rings series, you may be like why are we spending so much time on Gollum? Like that stuff may not
That's
make
true.
sense to
Yeah.
you. But
That it was a long.
I think you will basically enjoy this movie. Um that's kind of all I have to say about this one. Uh, this has been a much better start off than I was like I said, I was expecting like a disaster. Like from
Why?
because I had read reviews at the time and I kind of am like when things are this forgotten, it usually doesn't mean they're secretly good. And
Yeah.
I don't know that I'd be like this is secretly a great one. I think I'm like this is secretly a pretty fun time.
Yeah.
Like I enjoyed watching this.
I think part of my enjoyment was though, like it was like this is weird. Like
It is.
half of my enjoyment was just like, what's going
You're
on?
literally
What?
sitting there watching and you're like, this is kind of weird that this exists at
Yeah.
all. Because like I'm used to this being this big, huge franchise, and this movie does feel kind of tossed off the hump in a way that will make it feel unique among this whole series because from basically all the other movies we're covering on, these are big, expensive productions, and even the Return of the King that Rankin Bass made is going to have the expectation of like, well, we have to finish off the story, and you know, they had made the big, expensive Ralph Bakshi movie, and from here on out, it's the way we treat all these big franchises, where they're like, there are online fandoms who are like, you have to get it right, you know, you have to do service to the character, and this movie doesn't really feel like it's under that same pressure.
Oh no, absolutely
No,
not.
no, this movie
because it was the first.
yeah, and exactly, and because the internet obviously didn't really exist.
Yeah.
There was fandom culture did not exist the way that it does now. So I'm watching this and I'm like, it's honestly, I like that it has the space to not take the material too seriously.
Yeah.
Honestly,
I'm curious to see if at all, because it is a completely different director and production, if they keep the art styles.
Yeah,
If they keep like what a troll looks like, what a goblin looks like, what
I
the
think
dwarves
that
look
like yeah,
like.
maybe we can come up with like some comparison points. Just like literally like find like a still of a goblin from each of the movies and kind of like look at them as we go. You know, take a look at like who the actual animating teams are. I don't know. That's the other thing is I don't know anything about the production of the next couple. I don't know if they were like if they were done by the same team in Japan. I don't know if they were done in Japan or if they were done in America at all.
Yeah.
But these will be like really interesting things to look into. Um, we don't let's talk a little bit about next week because I
Okay.
think we're gonna have like a little bit more non-linear coverage as we go into it. So as we've mentioned, the next movie we're talking about is the 1978 film The Lord of the Rings. Basically covers the first book, half of the second book ish. I don't know. We'll find out. It's like a 2 hour and 15 minute movie, which for an animated movie from the
Yeah.
70s is insane.
But for a Lord of the Rings movie, it's very short.
Yeah, that's kind of the crazy thing is we'll be like, whoo, breezy. Um, but that movie is directed by Ralph Bakshi, who in my opinion is an odd choice for how much do you know about Ralph Bakshi?
I know the name.
He is
I don't.
he's an animator who like kind of made his bones, got known for making politically provocative, kind of like X-rated cartoons. His most famous one is probably Fritz the Cat. Um, one of his movies has a slur in the title, so I'm not going to say it. Um, they're like generally well-regarded movies that like the way we talk about movies now, they'd be like, well, you couldn't make that today.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they're insensitive at times, I think they're still. I don't know. I'm gonna watch a couple this week actually, and I guess I would recommend people who are kind of like looking to see where we're at. Maybe look at some of Ralph Bakshi's early movies, Fritz the Cat, um, Wizards, which is his other kind of fantasy movie he made right before this. That I think is probably largely the reason why he's hired to make a Lord of the Rings movie. So maybe try to like at least like look up on some of those. I know I'll be watching some of those in the coming week before we cover it. What are you like looking forward to or expecting from this movie?
Have you read any reviews on them? Are they about the same as The Hobbit?
No, this movie, this one, first of all, like it had a theatrical release. This movie kind of has more of an existence in like the public consciousness. So I think this movie like has its defenders because Ralph Bakshi is the type of director who like there are people who like really they love all of his work. And so they're like, "Oh, that's like a really misunderstood." I think it kind of holds a similar place in his filmography as like David Lynch's Dune, where it's like that
Mm.
was him trying to adapt somebody else's work, stepping outside of his normal comfort zone. Um and I think I don't know. I'm looking forward to it. This is kind of one that's been on my long list for a long time. I don't know. Are you like are you dreading the length a little bit?
No, not really.
Yeah,
It's. I mean, okay, it's shorter than most
that's
of the
my
other
only
ones, so
worry.
it's
But then
like,
I realize I'm like, there's so much story in there. Like
yeah.
it won't ever have
I'm.
a chance to slow down.
I'm curious on how they're gonna do it, unless they do the same thing and they just gloss over all the battles.
That will be irritating in a movie
Yes, there's a
that long.
lot of battles in that.
Yes, that will be irritating. Um, I think that's I think that's kind of it, right? Do you have any other stray thoughts on The
um,
Hobbit?
there was one. I thought it was so freaking funny when Gandalf pulls out the map.
Uh huh.
Um, and Bilbo comes over and he's like, "Oh, I'm so good at reading maps and all that." And then they proceed to show the simplest fucking map in the fucking world. Like the easiest to read map ever. There's literally a mountain and like something in the corner and that's it. And a hand
Like a
pointing.
kid's menu at a diner
Yeah.
where it's like help the man get to the hospital and it's like one single line.
Exactly. Like that is so funny because they're like, "Oh yeah, Bilbo's really good at like reading maps and he keeps a bunch of them in his house." And it's like this you how do you misread this map?
I do feel like people keep projecting shit onto Bilbo throughout this movie, and
Mm.
like, is there like that guy fucking is the best burglar I've ever met, and he's like over there with like a face full of sandwich, and he's like, "What are you saying?" Like I like it's like people keep saying he's so good at this stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
That's also one of the things I think they gloss over too much because by the end of it, he has saved them so many times in impressive ways with the help of the ring, and he does actually like fight and plot and get them out of a lot of
yeah,
situations. They hate him for they don't hate him, but they don't like respect him at all. And by the end of it, they respect him a lot.
that is
They
not present in this
not at
movie
all.
at all. Like
At
it's
all.
literally not a
Yeah.
dynamic because none of the dwarves are characters.
Mhm.
They're literally
Yeah.
just like window dressing. Literally every single. It was funny. I was looking at the voice cast, which we didn't touch on much. I don't think there are many people that are going to be super recognizable to wide audiences now. Like I said, John Hurt is in this playing Gandalf. Um,
Love him.
I believe the Elven King is played by I think it's John Huston. No, I'm sorry. John Huston is Gandalf. Um, uh, where is John Hurt in this cast? No, he's not in this cast. I'm
Oh.
sorry. What?
He's in the next one.
Wait.
He's
What did I
Aragorn.
do wrong here? I like mixed this up. This is crazy. Um, oh my god, I combined the names John Hurt and John Huston, two very different people. John Huston is like, if anybody knows him, they're probably from Chinatown. He's the bad guy in Chinatown. John Hurt, legendary actor, Aliens. It makes sense that they both were in these movies, but I combined the two of them. Um, yeah, that's that. I don't have much to say about the performances in this movie, honestly. I think they're very much like kind of cute kiddie movie performances, which is how I think the
Yeah.
actors might have approached this.
Oh, I did think it was interesting that they didn't have English accents, which I'm so used to in these movies.
Crazy because many of them are Englishmen.
You could
The
tell that
actors themselves are
yeah,
Englishmen.
you could kind of tell that they were putting on an accent that wasn't theirs.
Kind of half-assing it.
Yeah, but they weren't English accents and they weren't fully American accents, which I guess is kind of like the Middle Earth accent
Yeah.
was supposed to be. But they're all different. They're not the same accent.
He was what country is Viggo Mortensen from? Is he American? I know he's not in this movie, but he's going to come up, you know. Well, let's see. Let's take a look see at old Vigo before we finish up here. But yeah, I don't know. Oh, he's American. Yeah, I don't know. I'm looking forward to next week. I'm looking forward to kind of brushing up on my Bakshi. I think I will do my best to keep people abreast of like what I'm doing extra outside the movie. Obviously, like it's never my goal to like spoil a bunch of other stuff. Like, and I
No.
also wouldn't want to be like to follow along and not be spoiled. You have to watch like 6 movies every week. But like, I like to have context for people who might already know that stuff too.
Yeah, especially with the guest that we have on next week.
Yeah. So we mentioned it. We have perpetual goblin or orc of this podcast, Alex Campo, who is actually planning like my next he'll be co-hosting the next miniseries after this one. But it was like one of those things where when I was like making a spreadsheet of the episodes and like starting to like look at like, oh, here are people who said they might want to be on, people know Lord of the Rings, maybe I could fill these in. I swear to God, his name was just like, I put it in there before I ever talked to him. Like I was just like, we're gonna do the Ralph Bakshi one. I'm like, I'll just put Alex Campo in there. That'll be it. That's all that's gonna happen there. So he has been texting me for the past like 2 weeks, like watching Ralph Bakshi
Oh my
movies
gosh.
and telling me like, "Oh, I'm catching up." I'm like, "All right, man." So he's gonna come probably just take over the podcast next week. It's honestly, I'm glad we'll have an expert on. Like it'll be nice to have
Yeah.
somebody who knows definitely what they're doing.
He'll be an expert on not Lord of the Rings, but the director.
I think he's like a guy who is a fan of Lord of the, like I don't think he's like
I've never had a conversation with him about it, but also it doesn't, come up organically
No,
usually.
I don't think it's like his thing. But I don't think he dislikes it, and I think he probably has seen all the movies. But yeah, so look forward to 1978's Lord of the Rings with Alex Campo next week. Other than that, this has been Bad First Impression. You can follow us on all socials at BFI Pod for clips, updates about upcoming episodes, including like schedules of when things are going to come out, and announcements about future miniseries as well. Please rate, review, and subscribe on YouTube and any of basically wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to give us 5 stars and leave a review. And please tell your friends, because the best way to grow this show or any show is through word of mouth. If you have any questions or suggestions or things you want us to bring up, or if you want us to answer a question on the air, go ahead and send that into mailbag@bfipod.com. My name is Devin. I've been for the first full proper episode, co-host on this episode. You can find me on Instagram primarily at whatifdevin. KeriAnn, do you want to say anything as we go out?
If you want to fight with us about the pronunciation of Smaug.
Yeah. If you have pronunciation opinions.
Or if you want to teach us Elvish.
If you want to teach us Elvish, if you want to engage with any of this stuff, feel free to message us and tell us we were wrong, and we will tell you, get a life. I don't know. Yeah, if somebody wants to be like, hey, you got this wrong, or hey, this is interesting, that's fine. If somebody is like, you got this wrong, and it means you shouldn't talk about this anymore, then block button is very, very fast.
Let's debate in the comments section.
We are open to healthy debate. I'm not above reproach. I'm trying to, as I said, I struggle with quotes and names in this series. Do you have an idea for a quote we can go out on?
Um,
Hard. I
I mean,
surprise people with this every time.
I mean, the one song that's played 4 times.
You want to sing a
No.
song on the way out?
No.
Um,
the adventure is what lies ahead.
The adventure is what?
It's something like that.
Let's see. Let's see if I can find. Let's see if I can find the song lyrics. Okay.
Oh, the greatest adventure.
The greatest adventure.
I know the line is what lies ahead, but I don't remember the tune.
Is it blunt the knives and bend the forks?
That's what Bilbo Baggins hates. That's a different song.
Wait, blunt the knives and break the plates. That's what Bilbo Baggins hates. What was the song you were singing?
The greatest adventure is the one that lies ahead. That's literally the only line I've got.
Oh, that song blows.
Yeah.
That song.
I mean, none of the songs
sucks.
are actually good, but you know.
Do you want to go out on Blunt the Knives?
Sure.
Okay, we'll
go out. We're just gonna say it, or we're gonna sing?
We're gonna sing those 2 lines, and we're gonna end on hates. Okay. So until next time, blunt the knives and break the plates. That's what Bilbo Baggins hates. Bye, y'all.